Hello, I'm Carmen Tyler with the Impronata Group, and I'm standing here with Dr. Frank Marlowe with IWP. He is the Dean. Nice for you to be here. Thank you very much.
Speak to you.
Nice. So I wanted to talk to you about your role here at IWP. You are the Dean, but you also teach students as well. You have classes?
I do. It's my job here is sort of twofold. I do get the fun part of the job is spending my time in the classroom with the students. I teach right now I'm teaching the doctoral students a course in strategy and national strategy, which has been a lot of fun. They're tremendously talented students, and it's a small group, so you really get to spend a lot of time getting to know them and enjoy them, and you really get to see what remarkable individuals we get to bring in here. And so it's a joy. It's nice to kind of recharge the batteries and do the teaching. And so that's the fun part of the job. And then the other part is, it's the administrative and overseeing the faculty. And I'm very fortunate. My faculty is tremendous. We have so many people with so much expertise, so much knowledge of the real world. And so being able to offer them to the students and to talk to the students about them and to make them available to the students is great. It's part of the mission, right? It's part of us reaching out to the next generation of scholars and next generation of practitioners and really giving them the best possible knowledge they can have as they go off into the real world and exercise all the elements of power and all the things that we're teaching them. And so it's a joy.
Nice. Well, I know we're talking about specifically socialism versus capitalism, and so what do you think? Do we need to have more debates about this particular issue, especially with this presidential election coming up?
I think so. I mean, I was very pleased to see both the morning and the afternoon debates. I think they were very spirited. I think they were largely a little bit pointed at times, but in a good way, and I think that's good. And I think this school is founded on the idea that free inquiry and reasonable people sitting down and speaking together can come to some broader recognition of truth. And so I think things like this, more of them, the better. Yeah.
And so with the Institute of World Politics, tell me a little bit more about the different the graduates. Where do they go after this? Where are some of the graduates?
Well, we usually, a large percentage of our students go into the government, whether into the Defense Department, the State Department, the intelligence community. We get a good number of contractors as well, so they'll go to the defense contractors, the government contractors. We do have a good number who also go into non-governmental organizations, and so that's always encouraging to see folks there as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Marlowe, and thank you for IWP for hosting this here. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm Carmen Tyler, and I'm here with Michael Anton, one of our debaters, and I'm going to ask you a little bit of a different question. Tell me about your fascination with the Machiavellian approach to men's fashion.
Well, it was a kind of a gag book that I wrote in graduate school. I'm a scholar of Machiavelli, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if he had written a book with the same structure and style, except about this topic? And I actually, when I conceived the idea, didn't even necessarily intend to write the book. I just wrote a table of contents that I found funny, and then it took me years to write the book, and then another several years to get it published, and then it was published, and it was a moderate success, I would say. I do still get royalty checks for it every 6 months, but they're not whoppingly big checks.
I understand. That's so good. That's fantastic. Now, I want you to talk to me a little bit about your time in the George W. Bush administration doing speechwriting.
Well, I was there in most of his first term, so 2001 to 2005 on the National Security Council, so present for a lot of big things such as 9/11 and Afghanistan and Iraq and things like that. It's hard to sum up. Those were action-packed years, but I was very proud to be there. But also, over the years, came to some disagreements. I was a supporter of the 2003 Iraq invasion at the time, and came to see it differently over the years. And I look back on that now, and I think it's fairly clear that was a mistake. And so I've said that publicly and in print a few times, but not that I have any regrets about my time in the White House. I just think you've got to learn from your experiences.
All right. So with the presidential debate coming up, all the presidential debates and everything happening, let's talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and the socialistic idea. Do you think that America is poised to become a socialistic society?
No, it may be poised to, there may be candidates who want to try to move it in a socialist direction. I don't think anything like the full Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren agenda will actually be adopted. But should one of them win, there's no question that they'll take American policy more in a socialist direction. But typically that wouldn't mean the more fulsome or robust socialism you might see in Western Europe, but it'll certainly mean higher taxes, a lot more regulation, a lot more interference in the economy, and maybe some things more radical than that. I don't expect nationalization of big industries necessarily, though.
Why do you think it's been such a firestorm with the youth or the younger generation, the Bernie Sanders and following him? And
well, I guess there are two possibilities. My debate partner would say, because they've all been indoctrinated by their teachers. And I think there's something to that. I don't dismiss that. But I also think that they feel left out. And they see their peers, they don't, it's not like it was in prior generations where you could say, I'm confident I'm going to do better than my parents, whom I can tell did better than their parents and so on, or who look back, let's say, at their older siblings and they're doing great, and so when I get out, I'm going to do great. They see the opposite. They see, wow, my parents have maybe lost ground. My sister who's 7 years older and got this degree and she's still paying off debt, and things aren't working as well anymore. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
Right. And how can the capitalist idea help out with that?
Well, a more free market approach. What I argued at the debate is that we don't have a real a purely capitalist economy right now. We have a much more oligarchic arrangement. That arrangement is a kind of take from the middle, concentrate at the top, and that puts me in a way to the left of my own party, the Republican Party, and my own movement, the conservative movement, because I would support a bunch of measures that come straight out of mid-20th century democratic politics, such as tariffs and industrial policy and things like that would help that cohort and raise their wages and increase their wealth. You could call that capitalist, you could call it the opposite. There would still be a free market, there would still be free companies, there would still be private companies and things like that. I just think the scale has tipped very, very far in favor of a handful of industries that have mass concentration of wealth at the top, and we need to tip it back in the other direction.
I understand. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have one last question. Is this a bespoke suit?
Yes.
Of course it is. Thank you so much, Michael. All right. All right, Micah. Hi. Let me get mine. All right. That's right. Michael Utrich. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Trix. Sorry about that. I want to talk to you a little bit today about your podcast for Jacobin Magazine. Tell me a little bit about that.
It's called The Vast Majority, of course, taking the name from the idea that socialism would benefit the vast majority of humanity, and spend most of the time talking to people who have written for Jacobin, as well as people who are a part of the upsurge in the socialist activity, so people who are running for office as democratic socialists, or people who have won for office as democratic socialists, and in short, soundbite, half-hour-long conversations.
Got it. So which of the candidates, the Democratic candidates, do you lean more toward, and why? And also, why do you think that youth, the generation, is really on fire about this?
Well, obviously, the most important candidate of this upsurge in socialist activity over recent years is Bernie Sanders, who's put this idea of democratic socialism back on the agenda and framed it in a way that Americans seem to not find terrifying. They think that ideas about public health care or tuition-free college education and forgiving student debt don't sound like immiseration and slavery and an undemocratic society. They actually sound like they would make life a lot better for people who are suffering under medical debt or an inability to go to the doctor, or having enormous student debt and all of that. And so, he's the most prominent of that. But of course, we have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, others who are claiming this democratic socialist mantle and finding success, electoral success in it, as well as changing the dialogue in American politics about things like the Green New Deal. I mean, just even having a small minority of people with very clear and unabashed socialist politics has changed how we talk about some of the key issues in American politics. And I think in this next electoral cycle, you will probably see more people like them running for House and running for local elections and finding some success.
Got it. Now, there's a lot of just debate over the definition of democratic socialism and the difference between that and social democracy. And I know not everyone can read the books or watch or go to school to learn all of this from the Institute of World Politics and have as much knowledge as you do. How do you teach people the difference between those? Because there are fundamental differences, and define that for us.
So social democratic countries most often are talked about the Nordic states, Sweden, Norway, as well as social democratic elements parliaments in France, even the UK. And social democracy and social democratic policies are policies that put a check on the free market. You still have capitalists who are in charge of the economy, but you will not be thrust into penury, around healthcare or housing. There's a strong social welfare state and social welfare benefits, social democratic benefits. We think that those gains are important, that they shouldn't be diminished, that they made life very livable and dignified for millions of people. But it's possible to go further, to expand democracy throughout society in different ways, to strengthen the social welfare state, and to create societies where it is the vast majority of people who are in charge of those societies rather than this small number of capitalists who are still in charge. To take those principles of things that people like, of healthcare that's free, of higher education that's free, and expand it into other realms of life and give people more control, more democratic control over their lives. I mean, that is starting to get at what a democratic socialist society might look like.
Got it. And this also probably touches on the book that your upcoming book that you're having, right? That talks about going beyond Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, so what is most striking about Bernie Sanders' campaign to me is not necessarily the policies that he is pushing, although I think those are important. We can talk about those for a long time. But it's his insistence that his campaign can only be successful if it inspires something that is bigger than him. He doesn't say, elect me to office, I have the plans, and I will carry them out for you, and just you'll be able to just rest and everything will be wonderful. He says, no, that my campaign has to be a catalyst for a broader movement. And so if it seems like he has done that. He has sparked new democratic socialist movement in this country. He's helped spark kinds of trade union militancy. And so if in the years to come we see that both at the electoral level and the grassroots level, that will be the real legacy of his campaign. And that's why Bernie Sanders is himself, it's bigger than Bernie, as the book is called, that he's going to, that he aims to create something that is bigger than just one person winning an electoral office, or even people at other levels of government winning electoral office. It's about elections, it's about grassroots activity, and it is about a new surge in the left wing in this country that covers millions of people getting involved in the political process for the first time.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate that. And thank you very much. All right. All right, I'm here with Nicole Asha. Thank you so much for being here. Now, I was looking up some information on you, and I was very fascinated on your idea of therapy culture. Do you mind talking about that? I know we didn't talk about that in the debate, but I'm fascinated.
Sure. So, therapy culture. Do you want to hold?
I can hold. It's fine. You don't worry about it.
Therapy culture is one of the topics that I talked about in my 2015 book, The New Prophets of Capital. And I was thinking, in that book, I was trying to address some of the criticisms that people have of society today, and one of them is that people feel really alienated, and they feel sort of kind of spiritually lost. And so one of the solutions is this kind of self-care therapy culture. This idea that if you just think positive and you rearrange your life and journal and, really just manage yourself, that you'll be able to overcome the obstacles and sort of challenges of your life. And I critique that, saying that while it's important to be positive and to manage your life, we have to also be cognizant of the external sort of structural forces that are impacting our ability to succeed and thrive.
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, you were the only female panelist. I noticed that too. Do you consider yourself a feminist? Is there a new label now, a new type of feminism? And explain your definition of it.
Yes, I'm definitely a feminist. But I think, feminism, we still say feminist, but the idea of feminism is constantly evolving. And that's great because we are constantly expanding our understanding of, diversity amongst women and, our ideas of what women want. And, certainly no feminist claims to speak for all women, right? So it's this idea of actually building an inclusive movement and really trying to connect with other women.
All right. And one other question. So females, do you think that we would thrive more in a socialistic society or a capitalistic society, and why?
Well, this is an interesting question because it's something that is debated a lot in kind of socialist thought, right? This thinking about patriarchy and sexism as being a thing apart from capitalism, or if it's sort of part and parcel of capitalism. And so I think we need to really think critically. And I'm certainly of the opinion that, the fight against sexism would take place in any society, whether it's capitalist or socialist. And that has to be, part of the struggle. And it's an ongoing struggle, right, to think about that. It's not that if we got socialism somehow, which that doesn't even make sense either, that, problems of sexism would be fixed, because of course that's not true.
Right. Now, you mentioned you have children. So you have
I do, yeah.
2 girls, you said.
Yeah.
So how are you teaching them on feminism and how to be a woman in today's society?
Well, I'm teaching them to be empowered, to read a lot, and to be a critical thinker, which includes challenging me. I'm constantly, encouraging them to not just take what I say to them at face value, and to also ask questions about, what they're hearing at school, and to really just love themselves, and to really have a strong sense of self, and not worry so much about, the kinds of dramas that are happening in the world around them, but just to their job is to do their homework and learn and to have fun. And, that's the kind of environment we have in our house.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Hello. All right. We have Michael Gonzalez. Let me find you. There we go. All right.
On the dots there.
Yeah, right there. There you go. All right. Okay, Michael Gonzalez with me. And tell me a little bit about, you are a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Tell me a little bit about what you do there.
Well, I do a lot of identity politics. I do a lot of, I write about nationalism, but I also travel to Europe a lot, and there's a reason for that, especially the countries of Eastern Europe, like the Baltic countries and Hungary. They deal with this question of nationalities all the time, and in fact, there's a lot of synergies between those nationalities and what we now call minorities here, especially when you go back to the root of how the term was created. So I write also a little bit on Asia because I lived in Asia for many years. I lived there 10 years. So I cover a lot of ground. I have a book coming out in July. It's called The Plot to Change America. It's going to be on identity politics. So I'm very happy about that.
Okay, so do you think that we need to have more debates like we did today on the importance of knowing the difference between socialism, the different types of socialism, and capitalism?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that the fear that many that we talked about today in the debate of many millennials actually saying that they're favorable to socialism. I think that is the one of the reasons for that is that nobody has really come along and explained to them, described to them what socialism is. The constant failures of socialism, the fact that socialism, communism, has a perfect record of failure, has failed everywhere.
Well, and I know that a lot of the young people are, getting behind Bernie and they're getting behind his socialistic ideas. Why do you think that is? What is causing that fire?
Well, I think that they've been indoctrinated by their professors. I think that schools of ed, the universities, the part of the universities, the departments where teachers are taught, have particularly been taken over by the left. And I think that the academy in general and entertainment and the media and now the corporations have been taken over by a not just the left, but a cultural Marxist left. So I think that's all they've heard. This is the first generation that has been reared on a diet of Marxist diatribe.
Now, you are also talked about being a Catholic, and I'm a Christian myself. And where do you see religion as being a part and parcel with capitalism and versus socialism?
I mean, I think Christianity, all sorts of Christianity, is about choice. You can choose to do good or you can choose to do ill. Christ gives you that choice. We're not robots. And that, I think, is Western Europe, the West, really Europe, the West in general, the democracies. I think the reason there has been a success is because it is based on that idea of choice, and which the other side does not have. You don't have a choice under communism.
Got it. Thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be back in a little bit with other guests from the Institute of World Politics. Thank you. All right, I'm here with Julian Chin. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Great. Now, what prompted the idea of this debate?
The truth of the matter is, I said somebody has to pay for the fish.
And what does that mean exactly?
We were having lunch with two of the directors of the Claremont Institute, a very lovely lunch at a high-rise building in downtown Los Angeles. And because I have a taxi meter in my head, I said somebody has to pay for this fish, and I have to figure out, have to make this worthwhile for us. So I said, what about the idea of a debate, which we have done in other countries? And I said, why not? And they were responsive to the idea. So here we are.
Right. And what do you think is the value for right now of having this particular debate on socialism and capitalism?
Well, I think it's sort of the answer to every question that's going on right now, whether it's Brexit. Brexit has become about socialism now, whereas it wasn't a year ago. What's going on in the White House, I would argue, is about socialism. I feel like it's the left is pushing us always in every single regard. And by pushing, I do really feel strongly pushing, because we meet them sometimes halfway, and then they just push. So I feel that the left is always gaining ground, and we never seemingly are. So the battle continues no matter what.
How do you think the debates went?
I think the debates went well. I would like them to have been more debatey. The Oxford-style debate is not something that's very well known in this country, so it was more civil here, but less debatey than I'm used to. So.
Now, you have a specific role. You are co-founder of the Imprimatur Group. And what does it mean, or the purpose of cultural political consulting? Explain that for us.
So yes, we are cultural political consultancy. The aspect, my half of the company, I do microgesture analysis. So I work with politicians who either want to be elected or stay elected. It's the same skill set I have when I work with trial lawyers. I work on opening and closing remarks. So I bring microgesture analysis so that they can effectively communicate. And Michael Walsh, who is the co-founder of Imprimatur, he weaponizes the principles of Western civilization and teaches our candidates how to best weaponize those and bring them to the audience.
All right. And speaking of Michael, thank you so much, Julian. We're going to speak with Michael right now. Michael Walsh. All right. So my first question is, why this debate and why now?
Well, communism is back in the news. It never goes away. We thought we had buried it 30 years ago when the Berlin Wall came down, as I spoke about today. And suddenly we've got plausible socialist candidates running for president of the United States. There's one essentially running for prime minister in Great Britain. So we thought, let's have a fair, frank, open assessment of what the socialist policies, especially as espoused by the young people today, what do they actually want? So we put them on stage today, and we let the audience make up its own mind.
And how do you think the debates fared?
I think they went pretty well. It's a little bit hard wrangling so many cats simultaneously and keeping track of all the arguments. That on the one hand, you want a lot of interaction. On the other hand, you don't want it to break down so badly that it becomes a runaway train. So I think I tried certainly to keep it as focused on the principal question as possible. And next time will be even better.
Right. Now, tell me a little bit more. You did talk a little bit at lunch about the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and specifically, you know, what you felt when you were there and actually, remember you were talking about actually tearing down the wall.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to communicate to the younger people. 30 years goes by very, very quickly. And so I was 40 when that wall came down. I'm 70 now. And I've seen that what appeared to be a done deal, the end of Soviet communism, is now back because people forget. And what I tried to do in my talk this afternoon was explain how it felt to be there, what it was like in East Germany and in other communist countries, the misery and the lack of hope and the just general forlorn nature of everybody. And we showed a couple of videos from East Germany at the time. So you could kind of see the rather poverty-afflicted lives these people had. And that was in a relatively prosperous Soviet country. And yet now everyone forgets and thinks that there's no consequence to socialist policies when, in fact, there are terrible consequences to them.
Well, I've been asking a lot of people about what they think. The younger generation, you know, they are backing Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are more socialistic in their thought process. And so why do you think the youth are just jumping on board with all of this?
Because they're youth. That's basically it. You know, with age comes some wisdom, hopefully, but certainly with youth comes opportunity, hopefulness, and a disinclination to believe the experiences of their elders from the past. We just sound like old people saying, "Get off my lawn." But in fact, we and the generation above me actually have experiences that need to be listened to and observations that can be counted or discounted, but ought to at least be heard.
All right. And why did you choose the Institute of World Politics to host?
I have a relationship with the Institute. I am a visiting scholar of cultural political history here, and I've given several week-long seminars. And so when it came time for us to select the location, Julianne had also been introduced to Dr. Lenchowski and other members of the staff, and we thought it was a perfect place. One thing that somehow didn't get mentioned today is that this building used to be a Soviet KGB safe house.
Oh, we did talk a little bit about that, John and yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad.
No, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. Well, so I had so much experiences during my period in Eastern Europe between '85 and '91, meeting KGB agents, CIA agents. It was all James Bond movie is exactly how it was. Let me just tell you. Yeah, that was my life for 6 years. But this building has a history as part of the Cold War, and so we felt it was really appropriate to hold it here.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael, for all that you've done here and for the Institute of World Politics and for hosting this debate very much. Thank you so
Carmen.
much. Thank you. And I'm Carmen Tyler with the Empanader Group. And we would also like to thank the Claremont Institute and the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And of course, all of our panelists. Thank you so very much. And we're signing off.